So if you think about August of 1492,
Hmm.
right, Christopher Columbus is sitting in a harbor in southern Spain.
Right.
He's outfitting these 3 ships for a voyage that's, going to violently expand the Spanish Empire and ostensibly spread pure Catholicism across the globe.
Yeah, that's the official story anyway.
Exactly. But in that exact same month, I mean, literally the same time, the very same Spanish crown is actively forcing hundreds of thousands of its own citizens to flee the country.
Just for the crime of not being Catholic.
Right. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella had just signed the Edict of Expulsion, and they gave Spain's Jewish population this just brutal binary choice, which was convert to Catholicism immediately or get out.
Yeah, it was absolute chaos.
And what the official history books often just completely leave out is that those 2 massive historical events actually collided perfectly.
They really did.
Because the very people Spain was hunting down became the exact same people who secretly built, funded, and operated the New World. So welcome to today's deep dive.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to get into this.
We have this massive stack of historical excerpts today, colonial Inquisition trial transcripts, and just foundational research from scholars like Dr. Seymour Liebman and Dr. Jorge China.
Truly groundbreaking work from both of them.
It is. We are exploring the hidden roots of the Americas, the Converso frontier.
It's just a phenomenal hidden history,
Absolutely.
because we aren't just looking at the what of colonial expansion here, but the why.
Right, the motivation behind it all.
Exactly. We're looking at why a completely clandestine group, the conversos, meaning new Christians, and the Cryptojews, who were those secretly still practicing Judaism, why they became the absolutely vital administrators and merchants.
And even conquistadors, right?
Yeah, literally the conquistadors of the colonial Americas. And all of this while the Holy Office of the Inquisition was, actively trying to eradicate them.
Okay, let's unpack this right from the start, because there is this glaring legal contradiction here that I think you need to explain.
Sure.
Because if I'm reading the Spanish colonial laws correctly, the crown explicitly banned nuevos cristianos, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone with recent Jewish or Moorish ancestry, they were banned from traveling to these new colonies.
On paper, yes. Absolutely banned.
Right, because the entire point of the New World was to be this, bastion of uncorrupted Catholicism.
So,
How are the exact people banned from the colonies ending up running them?
So it basically comes down to the massive gap between the ideological laws drafted back in Madrid and the brutal logistical reality on the frontier.
Right.
The crown wanted religious purity, yes, of course. But they also had this sprawling, chaotic new hemisphere that desperately needed to be managed.
And surveyed and, exploited for wealth, obviously.
Exactly. And building an empire from scratch requires a sophisticated bureaucracy. I mean, you need navigators who actually understand complex mathematics for transatlantic voyages.
You can't just send anyone.
No, not at all. You need merchants who understand international supply chains. You need accountants, physicians, administrators who can read and write. Spain desperately needed competence.
So it's essentially like, think of a modern tech startup with incredibly strict exclusionary HR rules, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Like the board of directors drafts this insane policy that says we will only hire people from this one specific zip code.
Right.
But the CEO on the ground quietly ignores the rules, completely bypassing HR because they desperately need the best engineers on the planet to actually get the product launched.
Yeah, that's spot on. The local governors cared way more about getting the gold flowing than enforcing some religious ban on the frontier.
They just needed the job done.
Exactly. The detached board of directors in Madrid could demand whatever they wanted, but the governors on the ground were just trying to keep the colony functioning.
And we see that immediately, don't we?
Yeah. We do. We see this play out right away in Santo Domingo, which was the very first seat of Spanish power in the Caribbean. Diego Colón, who was Christopher Columbus's own son, he had conversos operating right inside his inner administrative circle.
That is wild. The people legally banned from setting foot in the New World are literally managing the governor's office.
Yep. And as the conquest expands, their influence actually deepens.
Wow.
Because if we follow the expansion into Cuba under the conquistador Diego Velázquez de Cuellar, one of the most powerful early colonists is a man named Amador de Laris.
Okay.
He is a royal treasurer. Contemporaries strongly suspected his converso lineage. He basically had all the markers of a crypto Jew.
But he wasn't hiding it very well.
Well, he wasn't hiding in a basement, that's for sure. He was using his massive wealth and political leverage to fund expeditions. In fact, he was a key financial backer of a young, highly controversial soldier named Hernán Cortés.
Oh, wow. which pulls us directly from the Caribbean into the fire of Mexico.
Yeah.
Because as we follow Cortés from Cuba to the mainland, we sort of shift from these whispers and suspicions of Jewish heritage into documented high-stakes facts.
Right, the paper trail gets very real.
Yeah, when Cortés sails for Mexico in 1519, he is bringing converso soldiers and specialized craftsmen right into the heart of the Aztec Empire.
And to understand just how crucial they were to him, you really have to look at the siege of the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan.
Because it was an island city, right?
Yeah, it was situated in the middle of this massive lake, and Cortés realized very quickly that he couldn't just march an army up the causeways.
He would just get slaughtered.
Exactly. He needed an amphibious assault. He literally needed a navy built from scratch out in the middle of the Mexican mainland.
And who does he turn to? A master shipwright and conquistador named Hernando Alonso, right?
Yep, Hernando Alonso.
And Alonso was a converso. He engineered and built the brigantines, these highly tactical, heavily armed attack boats that Cortés used to launch the devastating final assault across Lake Texcoco.
It was an engineering marvel, honestly. Without Alonso's work, the conquest of the Aztec Empire might have stalled for years, or just failed entirely.
But it didn't end well for him, did it? I mean, he survives the conquest.
He does survive that incredibly bloody conquest, yeah. And at first, he gets rewarded handsomely.
Right.
He becomes this highly successful, wealthy cattle rancher just north of Mexico City. He is living the absolute peak of the colonial dream.
Until the church shows up.
Exactly. He just can't outrun the bureaucracy. By 1528, Dominican friars are setting up the earliest inquisitorial hearings in New Spain.
And they come for him.
Witnesses come forward and testify against Alonso, providing these terrifyingly specific details of his hidden life.
Right, yeah, the trial transcripts mention a mock baptism.
Yes, the baptism incident.
Witnesses testified that Alonso had secretly taken a child and performed a fake baptism using wine instead of holy water.
Which was a massive deal to the Inquisition.
I have to admit, I'm really struggling with the logic here. Why take that risk?
It's a fair question.
Because if you are living under the radar, actively dodging an inquisition that literally wants you dead, why mock the central sacrament of the church? It just feels reckless.
Well, this raises a really important question about the psychology of the Cryptojew, or the Nusim, which is the Hebrew term meaning the forced one.
The forced ones, right.
You have to view this through the lens of deep multi-generational trauma. Forced conversion strips away a person's entire identity.
So it was like a rebellion.
Basically, yeah. This mock baptism wasn't just a reckless prank. It was a psychological subversion. It was a way of reclaiming this microscopic sense of agency.
Like taking the power back, even just a little bit.
Exactly. By mocking the ritual that was violently forced upon their ancestors back in Spain, they were secretly signaling to their community, we don't actually believe in this. The conversion is a lie. We are still who we are.
But I'm guessing the Inquisition didn't see it as a psychological coping mechanism.
Not at all. They saw it as ultimate heresy. Alonso was arrested and condemned as a Judaizer, and he was sentenced to the America's very first auto da fe.
Which is just brutal.
It is. Now, it's important to understand how an auto da fe actually worked, because it wasn't just an execution.
Right, it was a whole event.
The term translates to act of faith. It was a highly orchestrated, terrifying public spectacle of penance. The condemned were paraded through the streets in humiliating garments.
With the whole city watching.
The whole city. Sermons were preached, and everyone was forced to watch as a demonstration of the church's absolute power. And only after this massive psychological theater were the unrepentant turned over to the secular authorities to be burned at the stake.
So the man who literally built the ships that secured Mexico for Spain was publicly humiliated and burned alive by the very empire he helped build.
He was. And his death sent a huge shockwave through the hidden converso networks in the colonies.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting, though, because you would assume the crown would, tighten the laws and crack down harder after burning a prominent conquistador.
You would think so.
But a few decades later, the complete opposite happens.
Well, it really does.
In 1579, the crown wants to settle this massive, incredibly dangerous northern frontier territory in Mexico called the Nuevo Reino de León.
Right.
So they recruit a decorated military officer named Luis de Carvajal y Cueva. But to incentivize him to take on this brutal frontier, the king gives him a charter with a glaring, massive loophole.
And it was a huge deal.
Right, because Carvajal is legally allowed to bring settlers from Spain without proving their limpieza de sangre.
The purity of blood laws.
Exactly.
Yeah, in 16th century Spain, to travel, to hold office, or even just to attend a university, you had to navigate this obsessive, bureaucratic nightmare of genealogical tracking.
Just to prove you had no Jewish or Moorish ancestry for generations back.
Exactly. So by suspending that requirement for Carvajal's expedition, the crown essentially hung a giant neon sign over northern Mexico for anyone looking to flee the Inquisition.
Like, come hide here.
Pretty much. So Carvajal brings his settlers, goes on to found the city of Monterrey, and the frontier becomes an absolute magnet for conversos.
Now, Governor Carvajal himself was actually a devout Catholic, right?
He was, yes.
But his extended family, specifically his sister Francisca and his nephew Luis de Carvajal Mozo, or Luis the Younger, they were deeply committed, practicing Cryptojews.
And Luis el Mozo is one of the most captivating figures in colonial history.
Oh, totally.
Because he wasn't just practicing in secret, he actively became a spiritual leader for this underground community out there in the Mexican wilderness.
Right.
We're talking about a man who circumcised himself with a pair of old scissors in the wilderness.
Which is just astonishing.
He transcribed prayers from memory, he wrote deeply moving poetry, and actively tried to comfort and guide this hidden community. He was basically trying to carry the massive weight of a dying theology entirely on his own shoulders, passing handwritten texts around in complete secrecy.
But of course, the Mexican Inquisition eventually catches wind of this.
Sadly, yes.
They launch a massive crackdown. And in 1596, this brilliant young man, his mother, and his sisters are marched into the Grand Plaza of Mexico City and burned at the stake.
It's just a devastating, horrific end to that legal loophole.
It really is.
But what's fascinating here, and historians talk about this a lot, is the bittersweet irony of historical documentation.
Oh, because of the records.
Right. The Inquisition was obsessed with record keeping. They functioned like a modern totalitarian surveillance state.
Every single detail.
Every question, every session on the rack, every seized diary, every hushed confession, and the very court testimonies that the Inquisition used to condemn and murder the Carvajal family are exactly the documents that provide historians today with the most vivid first-hand accounts of colonial Jewish survival.
Wow.
The Inquisition inadvertently immortalized the exact culture they were trying to annihilate.
They built a massive paper monument to the people they destroyed.
Beautifully put, yeah.
So that leads me to a major strategic question for these families. The Carvajals prove that even a royal loophole signed by the king himself won't save you from the Inquisition once the bureaucracy catches up.
Right. The paper trail will always catch you.
So if you can't out-legislate the Inquisition, how do you actually survive them?
You outwalk them.
Okay, what do you mean?
You don't look for a legal blind spot. You use geography against them. You look for a geographic blind spot. And to really see how that worked, we have to shift our focus to the island of Puerto Rico.
All right, let's paint the picture of colonial Puerto Rico. You have San Juan, which is this heavily fortified, walled city on the northern coast.
Yep.
It is the absolute seat of military, economic, and religious power.
So if you are a crypto Jew living in San Juan, you are living under a microscope.
Right.
The bishop is there, the royal governors are there. When the inquisitorial commissioners visit from the mainland, they stay in San Juan.
They're watching everything.
Oh, entirely. The authorities are watching to see if you go to mass. They are noting what meats you buy at the market. They are checking if smoke is coming out of your chimney on a Saturday when you were supposed to be resting. It is a complete panopticon.
But if you look at the exact opposite side of the island, right?
Yeah.
Tucked away in the rugged inland hills of the southwest, you find the settlement of San Germán.
Yes, San Germán.
Now, San Germán was moved inland in the 1570s, and it basically functioned as the colonial equivalent of the dark web.
I love that analogy.
It was this completely unmonitored, off-the-grid hub where you could operate freely, just totally away from the eyes of the bishop.
The dark web analogy works perfectly here because the security of San Germán wasn't built on legal encryption, right? It was built on brutal physical logistics.
Because it was just so hard to get to.
Exactly. To understand this, you really have to look at the geography of Puerto Rico. In the 16th and 17th centuries, getting from the watchful eyes of San Juan down to the valleys of San Germán meant surviving a multi-day trek.
Just through the wilderness.
Yeah, through incredibly dense jungles, scaling muddy mountain passes and crossing these swollen, dangerous rivers.
Wait, I'm struggling with the logistics on the Spanish side here, though.
How so?
The bishop in San Juan clearly knows there's this rogue town in San Germán flooding the rules, Brian.
Oh, they knew.
So why not just send a heavily armed military escort into the jungle to force compliance? I mean, the Spanish Empire conquered the Aztecs. They can't cross a muddy mountain pass in Puerto Rico.
Well, they absolutely could have, but it comes down to resource allocation.
Oh, I see.
The military in San Juan was there to protect the port from the British and the Dutch navies.
Right, defending the gold.
Exactly. The governor isn't going to pull highly trained artillerymen off the fort walls to go tramp through a mosquito-infested jungle just to check if a farmer in San Germán is eating pork.
It wasn't worth the cost.
Not at all. The enforcement arm of the church simply did not have the manpower or the desire to extend its reach over those mountains, and this geographic isolation created a massive economic opportunity.
Yes, the trade.
If we look at the historical work of Dr. Jalil Sudbudio, we see a massive shift between the years 1580 and 1640.
Because that's the period of the Iberian Union, right? When Spain and Portugal united under a single crown.
Correct. So suddenly, the borders between the two empires are open, and a flood of Portuguese Cryptojews start migrating into the Spanish colonies to escape the Portuguese Inquisition.
Which was notoriously brutal.
Very. And where do they go? They sail straight into the natural, unmonitored harbors near San Germán, like Cabo Rojo and Guanica, and they bring with them something San Germán desperately needs to survive.
International trade connections.
Exactly.
Because San Juan basically ignored San Germán. The town received no official support or supplies.
They are on their own.
So to survive, they turned to massive systemic contraband trade. They traded illegally with the Dutch, the English, and the French. But the missing puzzle piece here, the how of it all, is who they were actually trading with.
This is where the transatlantic networks become really visible. The primary operators of the Caribbean contraband trade at this time were Sephardic Jewish merchants based out of the Dutch colony of Curacao.
And the Dutch were much more tolerant, right?
Much more. So the Jews in Curacao could practice their faith openly.
Which creates this incredible economic symbiosis. You have these hidden crypto-Jewish families living in the hills of San Germán, secretly trading molasses, ginger, and hides with their openly Jewish cousins sailing up from Curacao.
It's an amazing dynamic.
But how do you enforce a contract in a black market? Like if you're trading thousands of pounds of sugar illegally, you can't exactly take someone to colonial court if they rip you off.
No, definitely not. So you rely on the strongest trust network available, which is shared bloodlines and shared religious persecution.
Blood is thicker than water.
Exactly. The trade network functions seamlessly because it was built on ethnic endogamy. Cousins traded with cousins. They communicated through letters written in code, carried by trusted ship captains. Surnames like Lopez, Rodriguez, Henriquez, Rivera, and Pardo established deep, multi-generational roots in these Southwest valleys. They built a shadow economy entirely outside the Spanish monopoly because they had an absolute life-or-death reliance on one another.
So what does this all mean for the social dynamics? Because surely someone from the church eventually made the trek over the mountains, right?
Oh, occasionally, yes.
So how did this community keep its secret safe if an inquisitorial investigator actually showed up covered in mud from the jungle?
This is where the sociology of San Germán is so brilliant. There was no permanent Inquisition tribunal stationed in Puerto Rico.
Okay, so it was always a visitor.
Right. If an investigator did show up, they were a complete outsider. When that happened, the families of San Germán would employ what historians call a fortress of omission.
A fortress of omission.
They simply closed ranks, the investigator would ask questions, and the entire town would claim absolute ignorance. They knew that if one person fell to the Inquisition, the entire illegal economy that kept the town alive would just collapse.
So they protected each other.
They shielded their neighbors entirely. Jews! Here! Never heard of them. We're all good Catholics, Father.
Wow.
They survived by actively refusing to perceive each other's secrets to outsiders.
But if they are hiding so deeply, right, and they have no access to actual religious texts or formal leadership like Luis el Mozo had in Mexico, How did the culture evolve over the centuries?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of cultural assimilation, we see a very poignant legacy.
All right.
Over generations. Because of this extreme isolation and the total lack of formal theological training, the formal doctrines of Judaism slowly faded away.
Because they didn't have rabbis or Torah scrolls.
Right. They forgot the prayers in Hebrew. The theology died.
But the muscle memory remained.
Exactly. The physical habits survived long after the theology was forgotten.
It became tradition.
Yeah, deep into the modern era, these peculiar customs lingered in these hills. Families would avoid eating pork, but only on certain days of the week, completely without knowing why.
That is fascinating.
When someone died, families would immediately cover all the mirrors in the house.
Which is a direct remnant of the Jewish mourning practice of Shiva, right?
Exactly. And on Friday evenings, grandmothers would light oil lamps or candles in a dark corner of the house, completely unaware they were echoing the ancient practice of welcoming the Sabbath.
It gives you chills. The why was lost to history, but the what was passed down through physical motion from parent to child for literally 400 years.
It really is incredible.
San Germán was this fortress of geographic omission that allowed the bloodline and the habits to survive, even if the doctrine was totally erased.
It is a profound testament to human endurance. They adapted to the brutal geography of the island just to protect their lineage.
Which really brings us to the core of what we've been unpacking today. I mean, the sheer resilience is awe-inspiring.
It definitely changes how you see things.
Yet when you look at the map of the colonial Americas through this lens, it completely rewrites the narrative. The very people who were fleeing the terrifying religious persecution of the Spanish crown were the exact same people driving the foundational infrastructure of the New World.
They were the engine of the empire that wanted them gone.
From Hernando Alonso engineering the tactical ships of Conquest and Tenochtitlan, to the Carvajal family carving out cities and settlements in the harsh Mexican wilderness.
To the hidden merchants of San Germán.
Right, literally keeping the entire economy of Puerto Rico afloat through their shadow trade networks. They weren't just surviving, they were building the future.
And if you, listening to this, want to truly grasp the scale and the raw human emotion behind these events, I highly encourage you to seek out the Inquisition trial transcripts compiled by the Archivo General de la Nación in Mexico.
Yes, highly recommended.
Hearing the actual voices of these people, their defiance, their fear, their complex attempts to hold on to their faith while under torture, it bridges the centuries in a way nothing else can.
It's definitely a recommended reading for anyone who wants to go deeper on this. But before we go, this whole discussion raises a really important question, something for you to mull over.
Yeah, I think if we connect this to the bigger picture of how the world operates today, think about our modern assumptions for a second.
Okay.
Today, we assume that absolute transparency, blockchain ledgers, biometric passports, massive digital footprints, we assume that's the ultimate requirement for a functioning global economy.
Right, we want to track everything.
We believe systems only work when everything is visible. But the Converso frontier proves the exact opposite is possible. An entire hemispheric empire was successfully built, funded, and managed not on transparency, but on institutional blindness.
Because they had to look away.
Exactly.
Oh.
The Spanish colonial economy only survived because the authorities quietly chose to look the other way.
That is a staggering thought.
It really makes you wonder, what massive, absolutely vital systems in our modern global economy are currently running perfectly, completely out of sight, only because the powers that be are quietly choosing not to look.
Wow, what a question to leave on. We think we see the whole garden, but we have absolutely no idea how deep the root system really goes or who is secretly watering it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep digging, keep questioning, and we will see you on the next one.